Good evening, friends. It is almost the regular season. It's Sunday night. We have 4 days left until the Chiefs and the Lions kick off the NFL season, and it's time to discuss last week's draft. First and foremost, this might be a show first. Our buddy Rob P in the chats, first league mate to ever be on the live stream that wasn't on the live stream. Welcome, Rob. Thanks for tuning into the show, buddy. We're going to talk about your team here in just a little bit. For anybody new, this is the episode where Dan and I make everybody in the fucking league completely angry at us. People quit. Friendships are tested. It's a rough evening. Before we get into that, Daniel, I know you're getting over a cold. How are you feeling tonight, buddy?
Feeling great. Excited. Football season's here. Looking forward to hopefully not making anybody quit this time. Although I think our usual quitter, everybody who knows who that is already quit for the year. So
you better stop, because he's gonna find you and beat your ass in real life.
I love you, Brian.
I'm not going to go at Brian in this episode. In fact, that's the last time I'm even mentioning his name. But let's address the elephant in the room. Everything last year went to shit after this episode. It was not fun. We are going to shit on some of your teams. In fact, me and Dan just compared our playoff teams, and we have 5 of the 6 that we agree on, which means there are 7 teams we don't think are making the playoffs in agreement. We are going to be mean to those teams. Prove us wrong. It's fantasy football. We are trying to have fun. Let's keep it fun. We're not attacking you personally. We are attacking your fantasy team. Do better at the draft next year. Play it in fucking simple. I will say, for those of you who say this doesn't matter, I got 5 of 6 teams right when we predicted the playoffs last year. I did get Phil's team wrong as he owned the regular season, but Dan, you got him wrong way longer than I did.
Oh yeah. As soon as you were done talking, I was going straight into I said Phil was gonna be terrible last year, and he pulled off a great season. Yeah. Sneak preview, I think he's gonna be terrible again this year, but we'll save that for later.
I won't go terrible. So, Dan, let's start with, the main gist of this show is going to be the season recap, or season preview, rather. Let's take just a quick look at the draft. Is there anything that stood out to you from the draft? The one thing I'll say, this is completely like meta, pulling back the curtain. I do not enjoy the online draft experience. I miss live drafts, and I understand it's just kind of not where we are as a society anymore, and COVID kind of ruined that. But sitting in my living room alone doing the draft fucking sucked, man. Plain and simple.
I mean, it's always more fun when you can be with everyone and do that kind of stuff. But I actually found it easier to concentrate on what I was doing than having the side conversations and discussions. But it is more fun.
Yeah, I will say, but and that's interesting because you were always the one who would sit yourself in a different room during the draft when we did live drafts. So clearly that's just your MO, plain and simple. But yeah, I didn't enjoy it. And I have a plan where hopefully I'll be back in Ohio. But now for those of you, we're never going to change. We have league mates in Florida and other places. You're always going to be able to draft online, but I want to be more a part of the live experience. Dan, I'm going to call out one quick thing that you took a second to notice. There was a keeper change at the very last second of the draft, and you do not agree with that keeper change. And more importantly, I guess, it benefited your team. So talk about that a little bit with
Absolutely.
Your boy, Phil.
So Phil, we made a trade in the offseason of Waller and Watson for his 1 and 3. The whole thing started because he wanted Waller. He had to have him on his team. That's where the trade started. That's where it ended. We made this trade. And I don't know if it was last second just change of heart, or last second his whole plan was to try and sneak Waller into this draft and hopefully have him fall to him.
And it almost worked.
And it almost worked because he was picking 10 and I was at 9. And I'm sitting there. I didn't really like a lot of the options there. I'm like, let's just see who's at tight end. And like Waller, how does he here? And I was like, I gotta take him now. So Phil, thank you for giving me a 1 and a 3. Thank you for letting me keep my guy Waller. Pleasure doing business with you, buddy.
Now, I've defended Phil, saying that, quarterback's a tough position, and if you truly believe Deshaun Watson is going to bounce back to his top 5 ways, the trade still works out one way or the other. I will say in this situation, if you were planning on one of these guys getting back to you at 11, I think Watson would have probably got back to him at 11. The only quarterback who went in the first round went after 11, and that was Horvath taking Tua Tagovailoa at 14 with his last pick. So I think Watson probably makes it back to him. So, hindsight's 2020, Phil, but I feel like that was a bad move.
I think he did that move with his Browns glasses on. Unfortunately for him, and fortunately for me, it worked out. And especially if Watson's up being terrible like he was last year, and then it just doubles as a
Now,
happy moment for me.
since we're on the topic of tight ends, I'm going to throw one at you, Dan, that I don't understand. And I think we talked about this after the draft while you were driving, but I might be wrong. I don't get Kyle Pitts falling to the 4th round of our draft, which is the equivalent of the 7th round of a regular draft. And then when you consider we have 14 teams, it's actually the equivalent of an 8th or a 9th round pick in a 10 or a 12 team league. In a league where we can keep players, he is one of very few tight ends who has ever put up 1,000 yards in his rookie year. And I understand he has been a bust to this point, but the 4th round feels very late to me. Especially, I'm going to call JR out on this one. What really shocked me was Pat Freiermuth going a full round, 3-3 versus 4-3, a full round ahead of Kyle Pitts in this draft, especially JR, who loves the young guys.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Atlanta just seems like they're a mess right now. Like Drake London has, I think, a lot of potential, but he made me
Wouldn't want to
nervous.
measure wide receiver 1, trust me.
He was someone I looked at before the draft. Is like, maybe I could, but then it's like, in that first round, do you really want to take someone who could potentially be stuck with bad quarterback play, and it could be rough? I don't think it's just our league. I did a draft earlier this afternoon where I want to say Kyle Pitts went in the 8th, 9th, 10th round, somewhere in that range. So he is falling in a lot of drafts. I mean, it makes me nervous. I think he's a great athlete. And the other part of it, if you really pay attention to a lot of the football rumors, there were rumors a lot of this offseason Atlanta was looking at trading him.
Oh, see, I didn't catch any of that.
Yeah, I caught some of that. The Bengals were actually involved in some of those rumors as well.
That would have made me buy him even more.
Yeah, I think it's the Bengals. I'm all in. But I mean, at this point, you just don't. I don't think they're going to trade him at this point. But it's just one of those things. It just 2 years of not. There's too much hype, man. If he had less hype going in and put up those numbers, he'd probably be okay. But he had too much hype going in that he was going to be this Travis Kelce guy, and it's just.
Yeah, I drafted him with the full intention of trading him. I figured after the draft, someone would not like their team. We both knew Taylor wasn't going to like his team, so I figured I'd be able to get something from him, and that is the way it ended up playing out.
Sorry.
JR asking if we've added points for blocking tight ends, but that is a fair point in that Atlanta system who runs the ball more than anybody else in the entire league. So, Dan, before we move on to the season preview, I'll list off some of the trades, but before we even do that, looking back at the draft, did anything else stand out to you that you want to call out?
Not off the top of my head. I thought everybody did pretty well.
I did too. I was actually really impressed. I said to Brian after the draft that I was impressed with our keeper situation for the first time in a long time. When you look at the draft, other than the rookies and Jalen Waddle, Terry, what the fuck? Other than the rookies and Jalen Waddle, I don't think there were keepers available in this draft, Dan. Like, I know we'll disagree on the value of some players, but like, I don't see anybody who I was like, damn, that guy landed a keeper. Like, I just don't see him there. And it was rough, and it just sticks to the point of, man, focus on your keepers, not necessarily your draft picks. I'm not saying draft picks don't matter. I'm not going to fool Taylor this thing. But when I look at this, I just don't see a ton of keepers that were sitting in that draft pool.
I agree. I think a lot of people did a much better job this year of making sure they had guys going into the season. Yeah. Like you said, Waddle was out there. I think Joe Mixon could have been a keeper. But beyond those two...
Oh, I mean for next year. I apologize. Because I feel like Mixon's getting towards the end of his run. I'm talking about guys who you walked out of the draft and you're like, I know I can keep them in 2024.
Okay, I think there's a couple situations for that. Like, I mean, I took Javonte Williams. If he comes back, shows he's healthy. He's a young running back.
You already said it, though. You said if. I'm saying guys that you knew coming out of this draft. Bijan Robinson, Jalen Waddle, Jahmyr Gibbs, I think are the only three that you know you can keep in 2024.
That's fair.
So that's the point I'm getting at. There are a lot of ifs. Don't get me wrong. And Javonte Williams is certainly one of those. Kyle Pitts is one of those. If Kyle Pitts lives up to that opportunity, he could have been a steal for me in the 4th round. Instead, I traded him for a 2nd round pick because that's what I do after the draft. But like I said, there are a lot of ifs. But man, I just felt like normally we have 1 or 2 guys at the beginning of the draft where it's like, yes, I got my keeper. And 2 of the 3 guys this year weren't even thrown back players. They were rookies, so they had to be in the draft.
I get your point. Yeah.
So yeah, that was just my kind of takeaway with the whole thing. Looking at the post-draft trades, I was the one who made the first trade. I mentioned it was Mike Evans, Ezekiel Elliott, Kyle Pitts, and Nico Collins going to Taylor to try to help fill that roster in for him. All I asked for was a third, fourth, and fifth. My goal here, as everybody knows who's played in this league with me, is to turn my extra picks that I had in the fifth round into more extra picks for next year. It kind of hurt giving up Mike Evans, but the big takeaway for me on this, Dan, was I have Mike Evans and Brandon Cooks real close. So while I love Mike Evans, it was still worth it to make that trade and make that move for me.
Looking at that trade, I think, you've been better off hanging on to Zeke just in the chance that something would happen to Ramondre, especially at that point, because you didn't have CMC at that point.
Fair point.
I thought for you, I was nervous for you. I was like, man, it's nice to have that backup there just in case something happens. But
yeah, and I didn't know what to make of Zeke. I think he's going to play a Damian Harris role and probably be like an RB3 in our league, RB4 in our league. So it'll be interesting. And then Taylor keeps it going, manages to get Tyler Lockett for a 9th round pick. After seeing my trade, I don't think Horvath could be happy with only getting a 9th for Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, I felt like some people were just giving Taylor guys. I was like, why are we trying to help this guy out? But I felt like it was charity. I understand Horvath had a ton of early draft picks, guys he necessarily weren't going to play a lot, but we could have got more for him, I think.
Interestingly enough, this trade in the trade book is only showing one half of the trade. It's because it's that 3-team trade. I'm so confused. I was like, what is going on here? 3-team trade between Kenny, Taylor, and Eric. Eric very much not happy with what his draft looked like after 2023, meaning the picks he had in the draft. So he is going out and acquiring picks. He gets Travis Etienne off of his team, brings in Kendry Miller, and adds some seconds. Taylor brings in Jonathan Taylor before the Jonathan Taylor news, moving out Justin Fields. Kenny, by giving up Jonathan Taylor, Kendry Miller, a 2 and a 3, brings in Fields and ATN, and I don't think there's any other way to look at this trade than Kenny as a massive fucking winner.
Yeah, I think Kenny got the best end of that trade. Fields could be a monster for him. I like ETN, but that whole situation there makes me nervous with going with another early running back in the draft like the Jaguars did. But
JR asks if we like Brandon Cooks over where he grabbed Mike Williams. And so he grabbed Mike Williams in the 4th round. I grabbed Cooks early in the 5th round. So they were right next to each other. I'm big in the Chargers offense, Dan. So I think
I'd rather have Williams and
and I feel like they're the same kind of player, boom bust, and you just don't know what you're going to get out of them. So I think I would probably have had, if they were both on the board, I would have taken Mike Williams pretty easily. Mike Williams is a interesting thing for me because the boom bust nature of his game makes me hate him. I prefer consistency in my players, but when you look at his year end finish, he probably is the top 24 wide receiver for me relatively easily, and that's just because I adore that Jacksonville offense.
As long as he stays healthy.
Michael Thomas and the New England Patriot defense going to Taylor for a 6th and a 7th. Obviously, we don't know which Michael Thomas he's going to get. I don't think he paid a lot for it, but I also don't think he's going to get a lot back for it. So.
Again, this goes back to your point earlier about getting Lockett for a 9.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Then I go out and get Christian McCaffrey. It wasn't a long negotiation between me and Eric. He wanted Dalvin Cook off of me, then brought up, me buying a championship for Christian McCaffrey. It cost me a 1. I trade my 1s. I didn't want to give up Joe Mixon, but if I'm comparing the 2 backs, I was willing to move Cook. I like Joe Mixon a lot this year. I think he's going to be a high volume play, but Christian McCaffrey statted out as my RB1, plain and simple.
For Eric, I think if he's to decide if he's all in on just, working to get draft picks for next year, or is he trying to win this year still?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in the recap because that's kind of where I stand with him right now too. I'm worried about who his keepers are. He's obviously learning the league and he has the draft capital to go acquire keepers at the end of the season. He just might be in for a rough season. That's a sneak preview. And then the last trade of the offseason. I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I say my only issue with the trade is, I see nothing wrong with trying to trade CMC gets on the forum, but you got to get younger players than, guys that you could keep moving forward to go with the draft pick there.
And that's kind of where I stood with it. I mean, I wasn't going to turn it down. That's for damn sure. And then Dan, you make the last trade, James Cook and Tank Dell sending out Zay Flowers and Zach Charbonnet. So a lot of young players involved in this trade. That went to Rob, our newest Rob, who I'm going to call P from this point forward. I mean, we call Mott's. So I guess we could just call this guy Rob. I don't know what we should call everybody here. But anyway, new Rob picks up Zach Charbonnet and Zay Flowers. You pick up James Cook and Tank Dell. When I look at these trades, I look for the guy who picked up the best player. And in my opinion, that's James Cook. I think he's a top 20 running back relatively easy. I'm not saying it's a bad trade for anybody involved because Charbonnet and Flowers could both pop and could both potentially be keepers for new Rob at the end of this season.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty equal trade, and we both got some stuff we want. I know he really likes Flowers. I like Cook, so it worked out. I'm pretty happy with it.
There you go. All right, guys. So we are going to start with the season preview. I'm going to go ahead and close this little trade window now. I guess I could have had that up for like everybody to talk about it. I'm going to close the draft window too. So don't ask any more questions about the draft. And so as I mentioned, Dan and I disagree on or agree on 5 playoff teams, disagree on 1 playoff team each. So that is 7 teams we think are not going to make the playoffs. I am going to list you guys from the bottom of my little ranking system to the top of my ranking system, and I'll let Dan throw in his 2 cents as well. Just so everybody is aware, I rank you based on your starting quarterback, your starting running back, starting wide receiver, starting tight end, your flex and depth I put together, defense, kicker, and IDP I put together, and then I kind of rank how strong your rival is. And that is how I get my rankings. And we kind of already touched on this, Dan. Eric is the team that worries me. Eric came in last in my rankings. I don't really have him bad anywhere except for depth. I could be very, very wrong. My issue is he loaded up on picks kind of because and he had every right to load up on picks. His first experience in our league was not picking till the 5th round. The first half of the draft drug. He had to have been just watching paint dry at that point. But his roster is just kind of short on elite talent. Obviously, you like Joe Mixon. I'm not saying I don't like Joe Mixon. I'm just worried about how great Joe Mixon's going to be next year. DK Metcalf should be absolutely fine next year, but you have to start worrying about the Seattle quarterback situation when it comes to that point. So I just don't know if he has anybody on his team that looks like they're just going to flat out pop this year. And that's my worry for him, and that's why I have him in last place.
I have him in last place as well. I actually go week by week, look at every matchup, who's on bye, and break it down that way. So this isn't about how good I think your team is. It's about how I think the schedule breaks down for your specific team. I mean, like, what Ryan's worst week is the week the Chiefs are on bye, but he plays another team who has their entire team on bye that week. So it works out that way for some people sometimes. I get lucky. I catch Terry when his whole team's on bye. But Eric, he doesn't have the depth that other teams have, this high skill level. I do like getting Miller from the Saints. I think it's
a nice pickup. I mean, when you think about it, they're going to look to get out of that Kamara contract next year, and they could very well be looking to get out of that Jamal Williams contract already next year. So,
yeah, I think he's someone that could actually end up being a keeper for him next year as well. So there's some potential there, but I like to have seen him got a little bit more.
As of now, in the cellar. Dan, I'm going to let you talk about your next guy, and we'll see if it lines up with my next guy.
Next, I have Kenny.
Okay. I have Kenny one step up above that, so I'll let you go first.
I think Fields and ETN, nice pickups for him. The Hall thing makes me nervous. I love Olave, but after that, just nothing but question marks for me for the rest of his team. Lacks depth, the star talent that other teams may have.
See, I don't necessarily have an issue with his star talent. I think his keepers are set with Fields and the 2 running backs, and then may hit a home run with Anthony Richardson, the new Justin Fields. Actually, I'm saying his keepers. He also has Chris Olave. So I think he has the star talent. It's the depth. You hit on the depth. I don't know how quickly Breece Hall is ready to play football, and he has no backup right now. Jerome Ford may not play week 1 and may not even be the backup in Cleveland if Pierre Strong can come in there and play better football. Quentin Johnston's a question mark. Zay Jones I like, but he's a wide receiver 3. You're hoping he's a wide receiver 2. Kenny needs a lot of things to go right from these young players. We say this same thing about Kenny and JR and sometimes little Stevie every single season. They need these young players to hit. Are they going to? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. The one thing I know about Kenny, he'll make some trades to kind of change this up, but he does fall in the bottom 3 for me as well this year. The one that you skipped over for me, and I'll be interested to know where they fall for you, is Greg. So Greg is my second to last, just behind Kenny. I think I didn't know. I could be very wrong here. There are two players on his team who were great last year, Geno Smith and Evan Ingram, who were both top 5 plays last year. I don't think they fall into top 5 again this year. I have Geno somewhere around quarterback 13. I have Ingram falling down to 8, but in tight end, that's a steep fall when it comes to points. So that's where I could be very, very wrong when it comes to Greg. But then there's the issue that he's also very thin at running back as well, only carrying 3 running backs. Jacobs should be fine, hasn't played in the preseason. Tony Pollard coming off an injury. Jerick McKinnon, old, but seems to be holding the job down there. And then just a lot of question marks at wide receiver. Is Deebo Samuel still the one in San Francisco? What can Baker Mayfield do with Chris Godwin? And then is Jordan Addison going to just step in and be great? And that's why I think I could be wrong here is if Geno pops, if his 2 running backs are all the only 2 running backs he needs, and if Jordan Addison pops, Greg could take off. I could be very wrong here, but that's just kind of where he fell in my initial take on these players.
I'm much higher on Greg. I actually have him 1 game out of the playoffs.
Okay.
He's my top team, not in the playoffs.
Gotcha.
I like his team. He got some guys I actually wanted to get. I really wanted to get Addison on my team. I was disappointed that when he drafted him where he got him. Deebo and those running backs. Again, the quarterback thing does make me nervous. But he does have Brock Purdy there, and if Purdy continues with what he did last year, he could easily take over for Smith.
Yeah, that's a good point. Purdy over the last 7 games last year was a top 5 quarterback as well. So he has these potential for these guys to make me look like a fucking idiot. Greg could be this year's Phil pretty easily.
Let's do it, Greg. I want to see it.
There you go. Dan, I'll let you call the next one out.
Next one I have is Mott's. I got Mott's here.
Me too.
Spot. Yeah. Overall, considering he didn't have any early picks, I thought Mott's did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
There were a couple picks that he made. I think there were maybe some other guys available, but getting Herbert where he did was good. I told him when he made the trade and got Cooper Kupp that I thought that was his mistake.
Well, let's be clear. His mistake was trading a 1 for a 4, 5, 6 and losing his co-manager and just upsetting.
First mistake. His first mistake. Who was his co-manager?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I just know somebody quit the league after that trade.
Anyway, I told him trading for Cooper, a 30-year-old with hamstring issues, is probably not in his best.
And just to pour rain on his parade, a lot of the injury experts have done the math on this already. A re-aggravated hamstring injury on a 30-year-old receiver typically leads to 7 missed weeks. Now, you could say he's already missed 3 of those 7, but the re-aggravation just happened. So we might be talking week 5 or 6 before we see a healthy Cooper Kupp.
Yeah. And then I get the trade for Devonta, but he should have went after somebody besides Kupp on his on Taylor's team for that trade. I think that just set him up for failure. And then again, like you said, trading away a 1 for later picks.
Yeah.
Not the best angle.
It's the Kupp thing for me. I think he took a flyer on some guys when you look at wide receiver. I actually like Devonta Smith. I think he's a top 14 wide receiver, which fits right into a wide receiver 1 in our league. So Rob could potentially have 2 wide receiver 1s, just not to start the season. I don't know what Traylon Burks is. I notoriously hate the Titans offense. I don't think that's going to work out for him. But where I love Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence takes a Justin Herbert-esque leap this year and is just going to be a very, very good quarterback all season. My worry for Rob is when I look at running back. Khalil Herbert, who he got late, and I think me and you both mentioned that he stole him from us. Like we were both like gritting our teeth, hoping he was going to make it there. Is Rob's only viable running back when I look at this team. He has the entire Chicago backfield. He's likely to cut those guys. He has Jeff Wilson, who's now on IR. Elijah Mitchell could be a sneaky, like secondary type play. He just has all these backup running backs, and that's where not having a pick until late absolutely just destroys him in my mind. He's good enough at a lot of positions. Running back is not one of them. And I think as we learned last year, and as we're going to talk about with Taylor's team, I think that's what's really going to keep him out of the running, is not being good enough at running back.
I agree.
I had Phil just above Rob. So I have a feeling you and I are pretty close when it comes to these rankings. So I'll be interested to see if that's where you had Phil as well. And then Phil is the last team, or no, he's not. Never mind. I was going to say Phil's the last team I have out of the playoffs, but he's not. So Phil, the quarterback thing, I don't know which Deshaun Watson we're going to see. I actually cover the Browns for Football Guys, and some of the reports were very, very positive about Deshaun Watson, but then some of the reports, there was a guy for The Athletic who follows the Browns, Zach something or another, Jackson, who straight up said nothing he saw from he called the passing game completely uninspiring, and that nothing from the pocket worked. It's not what I want to hear out of my keeper quarterback. It's certainly not what I want to hear for the Browns in general. When you look at his roster, like he's bringing back, obviously, 3 guys that he had last year. Nick Chubb, an absolute stud. Stephon Diggs, an absolute stud. Outside of that, I don't know what Brian Robinson is. I know we're losing Alvin Kamara for 3 games, which is going to hurt him at the beginning of the season. TJ Hawkinson's the big question mark for me. If TJ Hawkinson comes out and plays Travis Kelce-esque as he did for 7 games last year, Phil could have a little bit better team. I still think, again, as we've brought up other people, there's a lot of question marks. If Deshaun Watson's top 5 and TJ Hawkinson's top 2, I'm probably wrong about Phil again, but I'm not loving him this year.
So Hawkinson finished last year in our league as the tight end 2, right? How many games did he score more than 10 points in a game?
Probably in our league with our scoring, I'm going to say 3.
4.
For the whole season, and half of that was still in Detroit. He
had 2 30-point games was his entire season.
And that's very, very similar to what Evan Ingram did. And I'm hating on Evan Ingram, but giving Hawkinson the benefit of the doubt.
he had a 12 and a 13, whereas other more than 10-point game. I hate Hawkinson. I think that he might have a game or 2 this year that'll make him still be relevant, but overall, not a big Hawkinson fan. But I mean, Phil has other issues on his team. He needs Deshaun to hit. He doesn't have a good RB2 behind Chubb. He's depending on too many Browns. If Watson's terrible, then what's he going to have with Elijah Moore? You know, who he has as his wide receiver too.
Should be his wide receiver too this season. I again covered the Browns. Really like what we could see out of Elijah Moore. Again, the Browns offense, even for someone who paid attention to them the entire summer, is still a mystery to me outside of Nick Chubb. I'll throw it out there right now. I think Nick Chubb's the RB1 in fantasy football this year, especially in our league. I think he's just going to take over this year.
Well, Phil, you got some moves to make to keep Chubb happy with the rest of your team.
Yeah, he's going to be very angry when he sees your record after 3 weeks. But hopefully Alvin Kamara can come back, make me look wrong here. I'm trying to keep this positive, but just not a whole lot that I love on Phil's team. He did great with kicker, defense, and IDP. I have a few teams that I really like what they did there. And Phil's was one of the ones where I liked what he came out with on the special teams thing. With the New York Jets, who I think is going to have a great pass rush, Younghoe Koo and Foyesade Oluokun, who's one of the tackle leaders.
Again, not trying to be negative on Phil. I thought he did a good job of getting some young players. Like he got Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's someone who could potentially.
Yeah, when you look at, and again, that's going back to the people who could potentially be a keeper next year. Obviously, JSN, if you believe Geno Smith is the quarterback or Seattle can handle their quarterback situation. That's a really good point. So I'll give you that. All right, so we've talked about those teams. Who do you have next?
I have Darren next.
Interesting. I have Taylor next. I'm going to throw that out there. But first of all, I guess we have to give kudos to Taylor to have moved his way up the rankings like this, having 0 draft. But you go ahead and talk about Darren, and then we'll talk about Taylor's team.
So I actually like Darren's team.
I do as well. So I want to throw out there, I have Darren next. I have Darren as the first team out of the playoffs in my rankings.
Yeah, this isn't like I don't like his team situation here. I like his team. I think the schedule doesn't break his way. Like as I was doing this, I was breaking down like how is Darren's record not better? Because I actually like his team. He had good, strong keepers. Swift could be really good. I like Schultz at tight end. I don't love having AJ Dillon as your flex, but I see him as a future potential keeper if Jones isn't in Green Bay next year. He has that young running back from Miami as well. He has some young players that could potentially help him. But like I said, I like his team. There's a couple small holes, and like the schedule just doesn't break his way.
You have AJ Dillon as his flex. I personally think it's going to be Cortland Sutton as Darren starts to look at his team. And I actually love his depth at wide receiver and having Sutton in the flex spot. If you believe in a Russell Wilson bounce back, and I do think that offense is going to improve with Jerry Jeudy's hamstring injury, I think this could be a very, very nice season for Cortland Sutton. So that's what it's funny. You mentioned the flex. The flex is actually what moved Darren up for me. I love Jalen Hurts. Excellent move by Darren getting elite quarterback. It's the running back situation. Is DeAndre Swift, what is he in Philadelphia, especially when they won't even just name him the starter? I think he and Kenny Gainwell are viewed as co-starters. And what does that mean for Rashad Penny, who also made the final roster? So that's kind of what worries me for Darren's team. Schultz needs to prove he's not just a guy. The good news is in Houston, he might be the number 1 wide receiver, but it's really It's depth that's kind of hurting me a little bit for Darren, but I will say his flex is not something I'm worried about. I think Cortland Sutton could do really good things for him.
I'm not, again, I'm just going by what he has on his starting lineup right now. He has AJ Dillon.
Oh, see, yeah, I didn't look at any of that. I found the easiest way to compare teams by position is I go to the trade screen where it just shows me all of their teams by position. So that's all I've actually looked at because there's way too many people who need to make cuts before I can actually judge by what they have in their starting lineup. So we approach this a little bit differently. So I'll get us started on Taylor's team. This isn't what Taylor wants to hear, but I don't even have Taylor in the fighting for a playoff spot category. Clearly you do. Obviously he's great at quarterback. He's great at quarterback with Josh Allen. He is excellent at wide receiver, but that's what, like, that was his whole aspect was coming into this is keeping Justin Jefferson and then making great trades. Mike Evans, Michael Thomas, Tyler Lockett, Juju Smith-Schuster, even down to Nico Collins. Taylor has wide receiver ones all over his roster. So wide receiver and flex are not going to be the issue for him. Where it is going to be the issue is running back. And I said I wasn't going to mention Brian much this podcast, but you have to, it's what Brian did last year, and it did not work for him. Jalen Warren and insert random guy were his starting running backs for most of the season. Taylor's a little bit better than that with Ezekiel Elliott, but not much better until he gets Jonathan Taylor back. And I think those 4 games alone are going to probably be enough to keep Taylor out of the playoffs. But then you're still just hoping it's 4 games. And I think that's going to be the largest issue hanging over Taylor's head. Is Deion Jackson going to get most of the carries to kind of make up for that? Is Keontae Ingram going to get a chance? You know, James Conner's not exactly the healthiest guy on the planet. It's a lot of questions at Taylor that he needs to answer at running back. And I think he's probably going to start this season over. And those 4 games are going to keep him out of the playoffs, my opinion.
Yeah, I have him, like I said, a little bit higher than you. I have him as the second team out of the playoffs for me. Again, Taylor did a great job getting your team together. Figured you would. I figured it would be enough to make the playoffs, and I still stand by that. I think you have some good weeks. Josh Allen and Justin Jefferson will make sure that happens for you.
Yeah.
But overall, you're just not strong enough to make the playoffs with this current situation. Now, if you make some other moves, that can change. And knowing you will make some other moves.
Exactly. I mean, he's running out of firepower, though.
I don't know. You just put Justin Jefferson on the trade block.
Taylor, if he trades Jefferson, this league is pure chaos at that point.
I'll trade you my entire draft. I'm about that life.
No, you won't. You are not about that life.
I'm about that life. I'll trade you my entire draft, Taylor. Send it. I'll accept it right now.
The team that I have as my last fighting team that I have missing the playoffs is Terry. And to me, when I look at Terry's roster, this all comes back to the keeper decision, Dan. I love Justin Herbert. I love this offense. And I understand keeping a quarterback in our league. I'm not going to pass up Jalen Waddle. This guy is a stud, and a stud who gets to play wide receiver too, opposite Tyreek Hill, which just leaves him so open on so many plays. Terry is great at running back. Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, J.K. Dobbins as a third. Not too worried about Devin Singletary or Evan Hull. But then Terry's going into the season with Amari Cooper. Again, we've talked about the Browns offense enough. Turf toe Terry McLaurin, which I think is a big worry there, especially when you hear all these great reports about Jahan Dotson, and then nobody else. Rondale Moore has already been relegated to the slot. I don't know how much that's going to work with Clayton Tune playing quarterback. And Darnell Mooney is the third receiver or second receiver on a very low passing volume offense. David Njoku, again, we're talking about investment into the Browns. I will say Dallas Cowboys, Jason Myers, Roquan Smith. I don't think anybody really did better at the defense and special teams positions than Terry. But the questions he has at wide receiver that could have been answered by Jalen Waddle. And I was talking to Brian about this. And I said, what if Terry walked out with Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Waddle instead of Justin Herbert and Terry McLaurin? And I just think you would rather have Tua T and Jalen Waddle, especially when you think about the stack aspect of that. So I really think that keeper decision might come back to haunt Terry this season. Let me be very clear, this season. But I don't think having Justin Herbert for your future in a 14-team league where you can keep a guy as long as you want, I don't think that was the worst thing Terry could have done.
I actually agree with Terry for keeping Herbert. If Waddle was the number one on his team, different story. He has a good number of games where he just doesn't show up for. at one point, like I don't know, I can't remember if he got hurt or not, but he had back-to-back weeks of just being like wide receiver 60.
He got hurt. It was was it an ankle? I can't remember. I remember exactly the patch you're talking about. He did get hurt during that.
But here's the thing I will complain about with Waddle. If you're just going to throw him back in the draft and someone's offering you a 3 for him, just take the 3.
Maybe take that trade.
I mean,
worked out great for Horvath.
I mean, you just take something for him. I mean, I understand if I was like a 9 and not want to take that, like, yeah, screw you. A 3 is a decent pick. That's just me.
Yeah, like I said, it's not that Terry has a bad team. And let me be very clear, and I think anybody who's played fantasy football knows this. If Austin Eckler and Derrick Henry go out and do Austin Eckler and Derrick Henry things, it may not fucking matter what these wide receivers do. Terry's going to cover the points that way. And it's not like he has bad wide receivers. He has questionable wide receivers. And I think that is the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. I have him out. I won't be surprised if he's in.
I love Terry's team. And I think I really think the schedule does break his way.
And you've looked at the schedule more than I have. So
he has most of his team on bye the same week. So it's going to be just that one really bad week. Happens to play me. Thank you, Terry. I think it breaks his way. I love Terry's team. I have him actually finishing second.
I'm saying you have Terry. You have him finishing second.
Yes.
Good Lord. I didn't realize it was that high. I was going to say, this is our first disagreement on players. You have Terry in the playoffs. I have Terry out of the playoffs. And then you have new Rob P out of the playoffs. I have him in the playoffs. So I'll let you talk about Rob's team a little
bit. I thought Rob did a good job. I like his team. It's just one of those things where the schedule just doesn't break his way as well. I'm going to try and pull up his team here real quick, what I'd like on it. The question is, what does Lamar Jackson look like in this new offense?
Yeah.
I'm not a big believer in Lamar Jackson as a thrower. So we'll see. He has great receivers. Running back's a little shaky for me. I think that's probably why the biggest reason. Other than that, I love his receiver. I wanted DJ Moore.
Yeah. Oh, he crushed it at wide receiver.
Yeah.
He got my second highest wide receiver grade outside of JR. He smashed it at wide receiver.
Of all the picks, he's the one I'm the most nervous about. I think his team could actually make a good run and get in there. But as of just when I went and looked at the schedule and how it breaks down, I don't have him in there.
Yeah, having not looked at the schedule, I don't know about that. Lamar Jackson, I do think smashes. I've been paying attention to this long enough that smarter people than me are telling me Lamar Jackson's going to be good. I'm buying into the Lamar Jackson hype. I love Jahmyr Gibbs. I would have taken him if he would have fell to that next pick to me. So I think that was a great pick. Jamal Williams for the first 3 weeks. As Rob knows, I've been trying to negotiate a deal with him. I love Antonio Gibson, and I also love Kieran Williams. I just don't have room to get Kieran Williams on my team right now. I think the Zach Charbonnet trade was a great to set him up for keepers. But when you look at those wide receivers, A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, DJ Moore, those are 3 guys that you're not going to have a problem. DJ Moore, I don't love as a wide receiver 2. Love him as a flex spot wide receiver 3. And then when you look down his roster, he has interesting guys. I don't know how he's going to keep all these guys. Zay Flowers, Jalen Hyatt. The one question mark for Rob's team where I could be wrong, first and foremost, wonderful pick on the Saints. I never draft a kicker, defense, or IDP. I would have taken the Saints. If you go look at their schedule, they don't play a competent quarterback for the first 6 weeks of the season. It's not until week 7 that it matters. I was very wrong about Aiden Hutchinson last year. I busted Xavier's balls about taking Aiden Hutchinson. Funnily, Rob comes in and takes Xavier Hutchinson. So I don't know about that. Dalton Kincaid is my issue, Dan. And what is your take on rookie tight ends? Because I stay away from them. Obviously, Kincaid is being looked at as this, receiver threat for the Buffalo Bills, but it's not like the Buffalo Bills are lacking for receiver threats. Dalton Kincaid, I think, is the weak link of this chain for Rob P.
The hype around him reminds me of Kyle Pitts. And I just don't love it. I don't like it.
1,000 yards and 0 touchdowns.
Here's the thing. I don't even
or
think
1 touchdown.
I don't think he gets even close to that, though. I think he'll get more touchdowns, but I don't think he comes anywhere close to 1,000 yards. I don't trust rookie tight ends. Eventually, one's going to hit. It's just a matter of the odds, but I just in that offense where they have so many other weapons and Allen runs it in so much, it's going to be hard for him to really have a monster year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like I said, yeah. So that was the thing I identified as the weak link on his chain. So you mentioned you have Terry at 2. I have Rob at 6. Who do you have at 6?
I have Horvath at 6.
Interesting. I have Terry or Horvath at 2. So I thought Horvath, with his draft capital, he made some interesting choices. I still think he absolutely smashed the draft, and obviously he came in as my second rated team. I know you like his team, but I'm going to make you go negative here. What knocks him down to 6 for you?
Dak Prescott, Isaiah Pacheco are my biggest issues with his team. Why I don't have them higher. He has Tua as the backup to Dak, which could actually work out for him. But again, part of it, I also looked at the schedule, and he's not someone I thought it really benefited from either. There are other teams I think I benefit from it. I think you benefit from the schedule. But again, I like his team. I have him in the playoffs. He's right there for me.
And because I'm the one who makes the schedule, I'll just throw this out there right now. How I do the schedule every year is obviously the rivalry weeks are the rivalry weeks. And then I take the previous year's schedule and pick a random week sometime in the bye weeks, and I make that week 1, and then I just continue the schedule again. So I don't do the schedule to try to give myself any benefits. I don't pay any attention to bye weeks.
Sure.
I say Dan's out here stirring up controversy. When I look at Horvath's team, I agree Dak and Tua could be the weak points. I think Horvath might be the only team in this league who needs to hold 2 quarterbacks, with the exception of maybe Greg, because you don't know what you have out of Geno and Brock Purdy. But I think Horvath needs to hold 2 quarterbacks. You brought up Isaiah Pacheco. He's going to be able to start Bijan and Najee Harris, and then CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, Calvin Ridley. Not to mention, I fucking love Christian Watson. That run in the draft where you took Keenan Allen, and then he took Watson, and one other wide receiver went ahead of me on there and made me settle for Drake London, absolutely broke my heart. But when I look at his team, and again, I know you're going by what he has on his roster right now. George Kittle, I think, was a great pick. The Eagles, great pick. Evan McPherson, great pick. Hassan Reddick, you don't know what that Eagles defense is going to be this year with all the personnel changes, and I still think they're going to be good. I just don't know if Reddick's going to play that same role. But I think Horvath smashed, and I think he's going to be a very good team by holding on to those 2 quarterbacks. I have him as my second-rated team. I'm giving him one of the bye weeks at this point.
Kittle, I love him, and I really actually he was someone I was debating early on.
Yeah, I was gonna say I knew you were considering.
I love Kittle, but he already has the what he got? What hurt? Something's hurt on him.
I did not know he was hurt already. So
he missed a couple weeks of training camp, and I want to say it was a hamstring, but I could it's undisclosed. But that's what sidelined him last year.
That's even more worrisome.
he had a really slow start to last year, and it wasn't until the end of the year where he really turned it on and became George Kittle again. Is that because of Purdy? But they weren't monster games because he was getting 10 targets. He was getting 4 or 5 targets, and they just turned them into big play touchdowns.
Yep.
Can you count on that for the whole season? It just depends. I think you'll have some good games out of him, but I don't think he's going to be consistently good, which is one of the reasons why I decided to go against keeping him and making other moves.
We got Steve Weiss coming in as my 5th-rated team. Where do you have him rated before I start talking about his team?
I have him 4th.
Okay, you have him 4th. I think he's been building for this for 2 seasons now. Obviously, his keeper set him up in a very, very good spot. Saquon Barkley is a guy you want on your team, especially now that he's happy. Amon-Ra St. Brown, as long as he gets back from, I believe it's a small hamstring injury. And then Mark Andrews, second best tight end in fantasy football. Overall, I don't have any major complaints about this roster. Miles Sanders is a guy who should see a ton of volume. No RB3. He cannot sustain an injury at running back, but everything else, again, I think could work out well for him. Marquise Brown, even in a bad Cardinals offense, should see a ton of targets. Keeper George Pickens, I think, is going to be a new like Gabe Davis, Mike Williams type player. But the main thing that works out well for Stevie, Brandon McManus in Jacksonville, Nick Bolton, a wonderful tackler, and then the Buffalo Bills defense. Mark Andrews, he did everything right at the positions where he needed to do everything right. The question is Kirk Cousins going to be more than the QB 13 when it comes to Stevie's team? So.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins is the biggest if on his team. He just needs a quarterback. I don't like George Pickens as much as other people do.
So here's what I'll throw out, because as I was saying everything I just said, I'm like, how do I have Stevie in the playoffs over Terry? Because I like Terry's team better than Stevie's, just like the way I've just said everything. Here's one thing I'll throw out where the rivalries come into play. Terry's rival is Steve Horvath. and that made it a little rough for me. So I call them splitting the series. Stevie's rival is Taylor, and I think Taylor's team is in trouble. So I gave Stevie an advantage in the rivalry category, and that's the only thing. So I haven't looked at the schedule the way you've looked at the schedule, and you've kind of mentioned, it hurts Terry, but that's where it kind of the more I look at it, man, I don't like Stevie's team, and I'm more worried about his depth. I didn't have anything really positive to say there, and yet I have him making the playoffs. I won't be surprised if I'm wrong about Stevie and Terry makes the playoffs.
My biggest concern about Steve at this point is that we know he's not heart and soul isn't into it right now. He has openly said his heart and soul isn't in this right now. If he's not paying attention, if he's not up,
you better push that baby to the side and worry about this championship, baby.
He said he's just losing interest, and I just, it's one of those things. If he's not focused, if he's not ready, and he's that bubble team, he could easily, fall apart here.
Really good point. Yeah, you don't want to be on the bubble when you don't care about it anymore because you have like a family now. Speaking of someone who is a new father as well, but I think he absolutely crushed the draft, did so great at so many positions. I have JR as my fourth team, and I think JR just did a fantastic job. I think when you look at coming away with Joe Burrow, obviously Joe Burrow needs to be ready to get on the field, and you'll be able to talk about that more than I do. I can. I think Kenneth Gainwell was a sneaky pick. Rashad White is a guy in a PPR format who's going to be good, and Alexander Madison's going to be fine as a second running back. But when you look at his wide receivers, Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Williams, JR brought him up earlier in the show. It's his fourth damn wide receiver. The Freiermuth pick, I would have liked Kyle Pitts better here. I said earlier someone else had my favorite defensive team. JR does, and I apologize for getting it wrong. San Francisco 49ers, my number one projected defense. Justin Tucker, my number one projected kicker. And then TJ Watt, everyone knows how I feel about him. So these are guys who, on my Fantasy Pros rankings, I have 49ers is my number one defense. Justin Tucker is my number one kicker. So JR did a fantastic job on every aspect. Running back could be his weak spot, but not to the point of it is for other teams, especially in a PPR format.
I have JR at 3. I love his team as well. My only question mark really is White. I love Madison where he got him. I another guy I was considering in the first round. I don't trust White. I don't trust that offense. I don't trust Baker. He makes me nervous, and obviously, like you said, tight end. But he also has Cole Kmet on his tight end, which could be a really good player. I know how you love Cole Kmet.
He is not going to be a good player. He's going to be a sub 60 target player who, if he's lucky, will manage 5 touchdowns again this year. He has no place on your fantasy football roster, even in a 14-team league. He should have been cut already.
You were kind of wrong about Kmet last year.
Oh, no, I was not. I was wrong about the touchdowns, but I said he would not be a top 10 tight end, and he was not a fucking top 10 tight end.
You sure about that? I think he finished in the top 10 in ours.
Oh, I got called out on this on Twitter. So maybe in our scoring, I know we have a little bit different scoring, but in basic PPR scoring, he was not a top 10 tight end. I do want to throw our buddy Lee up here. He says White's going to be a beast, and I'm going to bring up his other comment as a Bills fan when we get to your team. I've been saving that one, so I'm not completely ignoring you, Lee. We just haven't got to that point yet. I know we talked about him a little bit. All right, Dan, before we get into our teams, who we clearly both have making the playoffs and apparently in the top 3 or at least close to it. No, we already talked about Horvath's team, so it is just our teams. I have things color-coded, and I couldn't tell that we talked about Horvath's team. So you have already told me, based on my banner here, that you have me winning the championship, and I have me winning the championship.
I have you getting to the championship.
Well, getting to the championship.
I don't have you winning. I have you losing.
Right, where do you have yourself, Dan? I have you at 3.
I have myself at 5.
You have yourself at 5?
Yeah, my quarterback situation is not ideal. It really comes down to Daniel Jones. If he can still be in the top 10 again this year, then I think I'll be in good shape. But it's just, I'm not thrilled about it. I actually am a little more excited about Jordan Love at this point.
Interesting.
The NFC is absolute garbage, and getting a quarterback,
especially the NFC North. So.
He's gonna have a lot of weeks against bad defenses.
Yeah,
I'm not saying he is top 10 in terms of talent or ability at this point, but I think because of the way the schedule works out, who he's gonna be playing against, he could have a top 10 season.
I don't even who is JR asking me to trade for? TJ Watt? I don't even know which one of his players he's talking about at this point. Let me know, guy. What I like about your team is you could tell you and I have been doing this for a long time. We build our teams very similarly. Your fucking depth at running back is obscene. Aaron Jones, Dameon Pierce, Javonte Williams, wonderful player. And then you go trade for James Cook. And while Drifter does not think James Cook is a top 20 guy, he did stat out that way for me in PPR. And my reasoning behind this was I think he's pretty well guaranteed 230 touches in a very electric Buffalo Bills offense. But I love that you brought up it's going to come down to Daniel Jones, because word for word in my write-up of your team, Dan, is Danny Dimes will make or break you. If he is the same as he was last year, 800 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, or something along those lines, you're going to make a run at a bye week. If he falls back down to earth, that's where you're going to have the trouble. JR, you can't trade with Drifter. We haven't let him in the league yet. That he does say White's a beast. He can't trade for you because we haven't let him in the league. Stop bringing this up every episode and making him feel bad about himself and feel bad about me. But anyway, if Daniel Jones falls back down to a turnover machine, I don't think it's going to be quite that bad of a fall to earth. But if he falls back down to a Kirk Cousins 11 through 14 guy, that's where I have you still in the playoffs. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about Daniel Jones right now. But if he's a top 6 guy with that rushing upside that he showed last year, I think you have a legitimate chance at a bye week.
Yeah, again, if he is top 10, I'm gonna feel really good with my team, but he has to prove it. Quarterbacks didn't shake out the way I was hoping for in the draft, so best option I had.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like that's how a lot of people felt about it. Like I said, I think that's why Stevie Horvath took Tua and whoever the hell else he took. Dak Prescott, back-to-back quarterbacks in like back-to-back rounds, because I don't think it shook out for a lot of people. And Horvath, of all people, has seen what it's like to suffer at quarterback. Someone who won't be suffering at quarterback, Dan, is me. I think the key to my season.
Did you just jinx yourself? Is Mahomes getting hurt?
Never. It can't happen. The league won't allow it. Even when he gets hurt, he comes in and balls out. Let's not forget he did that last year. The key to my success was the CMC trade. I don't even know how I would have felt about my team pre the CMC trade, but my goodness, I have my number 1 rated quarterback, my number 1 rated running back, my number 1 rated tight end. I hate my receivers, and I'm going to let you go in on my receivers here in a second because I don't like them. Michael Pittman, low volume offense. Drake London, low volume offense. I do think Deontay Johnson could surprise. I might end up starting Brandon Cooks and KJ Osborne. I do want this on tape. Puka fucking Nacua is going to be a real player this year. He is going to make my final roster, and I think Puka Nacua, at the very least, in our league scoring, is a top 36 wide receiver in fantasy football this year.
I'm not going to go in on your receivers because they're okay, and that's all you need them to be. When you have the other guys you have on your team, all you need to be is okay. I don't understand how we let you get Mahomes, McCaffrey, and Kelsey. Doesn't make sense to me. I have you going 13-1 on the season. I forget. I should have marked down who was that one loss, but
it's got to be you in week 1 or 13, right?
Yeah,
or
I have me losing both times to you.
Okay.
I don't like the matchups, but as you've all known with me, it comes down to schedule. Championship week, you have the Chiefs playing against the Bengals. Patrick Mahomes has not had good games against that Bengals defense.
That scares me.
Travis Kelce has not had good games going against that Bengals defense.
Is it in Cincinnati or is it in Kansas City?
It is not. It's in Kansas City.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better.
But either way, they've done this twice in Kansas City, and they've not had great games.
Well, it worked out pretty well for them in the playoffs last year.
They scored 23 points. Mahomes had 1 touchdown. Is that what you want in the championship? You want Mahomes with 1 touchdown?
Is that all it was?
Yeah, it was 23-20.
Okay.
Every game they've played has been like 23-20 or 20-17, something like that, 27-24. A lot of field goals, not a lot of touchdowns.
Okay. Well, I'm worried about
losing in championship week because of that fact to Terry, and Terry gets his first championship.
I picked Terry last year. I don't even have Terry making the playoffs this year. I'm picking myself. I'm going back to my old ways. I think I win the championship. I'm not even a little bit worried about it. I do want to throw JR's comment up here that those guys worked really well together, with the exception of Kelsey. I would never let you have Kelsey. But when Mahomes and Christian McCaffrey were on his team, I believe that was a championship roster for him not that long ago. I'll give you this, Drifter. Mahomes is not a cheat code guy. However, the way I guess our scoring does favor. We are a 6-point touchdown league. We penalize interceptions quite a bit, but we also don't give as many points for passing yards as other teams do. So rushing quarterbacks do still have a little bit of an advantage, but Patrick Mahomes has worked out really, really well for our league. And while I have Drifter up on the screen here, I'm going to throw him back up here. It is our loss, buddy. I'll get over this keeping it local thing, but shout out to you for watching this show every single time. And JR, I would like to know when you had Kelsey. I don't remember this. We're going to have a discussion.
He gave you Kelsey. That's fact.
Is it?
Yeah.
I'll do a little league research because I don't remember that whatsoever. Guys, that's the end of the show. Dan picks Terry for the championship. I pick myself for the championship. Dan, any parting words for our friends?
Who you got beating in the championship?
Oh, I didn't break down the whole playoffs. I'll say I have Horvath with the bye. So I would say Horvath. I didn't go down and break it down in the schedule the way you did, but I have Horvath as the second best record. So I would say me over Horvath.
Okay. All right. No, glad we're back, guys. Love you guys. Phil, that trade you're texting me about ain't happening, just so you know.
I want to throw out, especially for the new people, if you guys ever want to jump on the show, we are going to do this probably Saturday mornings, Dan. Is that still kind of your thing?
For the most part, except for when my wife works Friday nights.
Okay. So Saturday mornings, usually relatively early in the morning, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning is when we've been doing it, but we can make it work around you guys. We'd love to have any of you on the show. If any of you guys want to come on, all you need is some sort of camera. You can actually do the whole show from your phone. It's a very easy thing. I send you a link. You come on, we talk shit. During the regular season, we will talk about the previous week's games and the upcoming matchups. We'll put our picks out there. We have a lot of fun with it. It's going to be a fun season. We do not do the show to make anybody mad. It is all love unless you're playing me that week. And guess what, Dan? That's you. So fuck you, Dan. I hope you have a terrible week 1. We are going to do a week 1 preview show. So you guys will see us again in 6 days from now, right, Dan?
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, especially you, Drifter. All love, baby. Sorry you're not in the league, but you are our number 1 fan, and we appreciate you very, very much. And shout out to all the league mates who joined the live draft tonight, apparently, or the live chat tonight. Apparently 9 o'clock on a Sunday night is the way we get it going. So
holiday weekends.
There you go. Oh, Drifter, if you want to come on the show, buddy. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
Hold on. While I have you live on air right now, I am going to drop you my email address that I use for fantasy football. Shoot me an email and I will get you a show invite. 100%. I just dropped it in the YouTube chat. Shoot me an email, Drifter. We'll make this work. That's awesome. We would love nothing more than to have you on the show. Thanks everybody for tuning in. You guys have a great night. We'll see you guys next Saturday. Peace.